Welcome to the Halloween edition of 86th. Before I even start this video, I got most of my information from this documentary. It's called America's Worst Serial Killer, The Cannibal Joe Metheny. True crime documentary ghost hunting. So, Jow Metheny is currently dead, but before he died, he showed the location of bodies that he had buried. He was charged with assault and 2 counts of murder, but it's suspected that he killed a lot more people than that. When I do my hamburgers, sometimes I will mix it with pork, especially if it's really lean beef. I don't put a lot of extra stuff in it. It's usually just beef, but sometimes it'll be pork and beef. Jow Metheny did something similar, except instead of pork, he used human flesh. He sold these burgers out of a stand. Jow Metheny's dad died in around 1960. It's heavily suspected that he was neglectful, often being left alone at home. I'm sure that Joe was affected by this in a negative way. His mom actually did a lot of food service work, including being a server and working at a food truck. The mom worked her ass off, always provided for her kids, and always put them before her. He did join the military, though, and he lied about his service in Vietnam. It's suspected that during his time in the military and after, he developed a drug addiction, specifically heroin. As Joe grew up, he was taken care of more by babysitters than he was his own family, his own mother, specifically after his father died. Joe drank really heavily. Joe put away a bottle of hard liquor every single night, and I'm sure that probably had an effect on his brain after a while, but it shows that he's perfect line cook material, right? He spent some time homeless, and this is actually important. This is one link in the chain of events that led to him, between him being mentally unstable and having a lot of issues with drug addiction and being homeless. Even his relationships were extremely toxic and unhealthy. Now, this is where things start to take a turn. We don't really know what triggers people to start becoming serial killers, and Joe is no different. During the video, America's Worst Serial Killer, there's a specific cutscene that has an interview excerpt, and this is from murderpedia.org, and it says the following. It all started back in July of 1994. I was at work. I was a truck driver. I was working overtime this one night. Then I got off and went home as I always did. But when I opened the door and turned on the light, I noticed that there was nothing there. My old lady had taken everything, including my son, and left me. Her leaving was not my problem, but she took my 6-year-old son with her. She was a crack addict and a worthless piece of... I would have paid her to get out of my life. All she did was take my son over to my mother's house, and she could have had everything else and be gone. Now, needless to say, Joe was pissed, and this was the start of a villain origin story. According to everybody else, Joe never got angry. But the opposite is actually true. He got angry frequently and sometimes would go into a rage, but he would bottle all of that rage up and be quiet about it, not say anything to anybody. All of this started to boil over, and he eventually wanted to get revenge on his wife. They were living in a tent city at the time, and he decided that he wanted to kill them. Now, there's good news and bad news about this story. The good news is the son and the mother were still alive. He didn't kill them. But the bad news is he found 2 homeless men, and he hacked them up with a hatchet. He claims that 2 of these people had gotten high with the mother of his child. After that, he questioned another woman and lured her away from the camp, beat her senseless, and discarded the body. I believe it was in the river. He did this again. Everything. Beat her, raped her, and killed her under the bridge. Both of these women that he killed, along with another fisherman, and weighed their body down and threw them in the river. This was all because they didn't have the information that he wanted, which was the location of his wife and son. This place was really rough. The murder weapon was picked up by a different homeless man, and it was used in a homeless gang war, so to speak. I want to be clear. In one single night, 6 people died. This would technically count as a mass murder. Now here's what's messed up. Joe was charged with the murders of 2 of these people. They found the bodies 2 weeks later. He was released. They didn't have enough evidence. Now, this happened around 1994. Prior to this, he had been working at a pallet factory. There was actually one other victim before this, and she was a hooker that worked around the area of the pallet factory where he used to work. He had sex with her. It was consensual sex. They did drugs, had sex, and then pushed her to the ground, choked the life out of her. He ended up strangling her with an extension cord. It's believed that between his narcissistic behavior and his desire to control was a result of this, with a mixture of his rage. Now, I don't know how to really say this next part, but he processed his victim. He dismembered her and hacked her up and cut all of the muscular parts off, the quote-unquote meaty parts, and stored them in Tupperware containers in a fridge. If that wasn't bad enough, during his confession, he admitted to later unburying her and trying to have sex with her skull. You can imagine what he did with the Tupperware containers in his fridge. He wasn't selling burgers yet. His next victim was a young woman who had a fight with her mom, ended up at the bar. He lured her back to the trailer, and he violated her with a beer bottle, and murdered her. It was said that the crime scene was absolutely awful. Blood everywhere. He again cut all of the meaty portions off of his victim and stored them the way that you would fabricate a deer. He then dismembered her and buried his victim in different spots all over the yard around his trailer. He would do these horrible things, then simply go to work and load pallets. Could you imagine working for somebody, working with somebody, and they seem like a normal employee, and you find out that they are doing these horrible things? Here is where things take another turn and go to the next level, if you can even believe that there is a next level to this monster. After Kimberly's murder, he took the meat, opened up a hamburger stand, and started combining the human meat with the hamburgers. He sold out of his barbecue and his hamburgers extremely fast, and people loved it. According to his confession to police, he stated what human flesh tastes like. He says the following: "Over the next couple weeks, on the weekends, I opened up a little pit beef stand. I had real roast beef and pork sandwiches. And why not? They were very good. The human body taste was similar to pork, very similar. In fact, if you mix it together, nobody can tell the difference. I don't think I want to ever eat pork ever again." He did this for a few weeks. Eventually, he ran out of human flesh to mix in with his hamburgers. And when he did this, he started looking for more people to kill and butcher for his food stand. Like cannibalism is associated with a form of control. I believe that this was a similar aspect to Jeffrey Dahmer, who ate the heart of his victims and attempted to zombify them. It was all about control, a lack of control in your life, reflecting on the need to control others in some way, and with very obvious mental disorders and delusions. Now we fast forward to 1996, and he did the same thing that he did before. The thing about Joe is extremely overweight. He's considered morbidly obese. He tried to get another victim. The same thing that he did before. His plan was to lure her back to the trailer, fill her full of drugs, kill her, butcher her body, and put it in the freezer. However, this victim was lucky. She was able to escape and call the police. And because of Joe's size, he couldn't keep up with her after the struggle ensued, and she was able to get away. Before, I had said that he worked at a pallet factory. Some of the victims that he killed, he buried at his job site at the pallet factory, and they stayed there for 2 years until his full confession, where they uncovered the remains. This was just a quick overview of Jow Metheny, the food truck killer. He committed his crimes in Baltimore. And again, this information came from the YouTube video America's Worst Serial Killer, which contains most of the confession material along with many other awesome scenes, and they also do a little bit of ghost hunting, so I highly recommend that you go check that out, the full video, if you're interested in subjects like this. Jow Metheny was a monster. He is one of the worst people. Before I started this video, I knew a little bit about a food truck serial killer who ground his victims into hamburger meat and sold them. But I never realized until doing this video to what extent and how awful and deplorable his crimes are. If you have any horror stories related to the food service industry, leave them in the comments below. And if you have suggestions for future videos, let me know those as well. But you guys have an awesome day, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace. You're in the shot, Quinn. Come on. Gotta go this way a little bit. Gotta go this way a little bit. You wanna go to my lap? How about you go to my lap? Yeah, come on. There we go. There you go. Be on my lap.